Miles to Midnight is available on Amazon.com, Kindle, and on the publisher or at the publisher at Gladity. So pick up your copy today. I receive excellent feedback from my book. And you are listening to Studio A. And I have a regular guest that's here tonight with us, and I just love having him on each time he's on. It's so informative. My special guest this evening is Steve Colbern. And Steve Colbern is a chemist and chief materials scientist with 20 years of industrial experience. He is currently working in the area of carbon nanotubes. And Steve Colbern has analyzed several alleged alien implants that the late Dr. Roger Leir has removed from patients and has uncovered startling findings. Steve's research discovered that these objects contain carbon nanotubes and other nanostructures, indicating that they are sophisticated nano-devices made by a level of nanotechnology far beyond that of current mainstream earthly science. Steve is constantly being asked to research and evaluate specimens that people bring to him, and he takes his scientific research very seriously and is dedicated to proving the truth about nanotechnology and all it contains. You can access his website at alienevidenceinc.webs.com. So please welcome Steve to the show this evening. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing tonight?
No, just fine.
Great. It's great to have you on board. It's nice to hear your voice again.
Yeah, nice to hear yours too.
Yeah.
Laura's not here.
Yeah, it's been a while. So tell everybody what you've been doing.
Well, I've been monitoring radiation levels and just analyzing a few samples people have brought in, doing scans, and it hasn't been too exciting lately, but I'm doing a lot of research with a lady from New Hampshire that's got a lot of activity and have come across a lot of strange UFO sightings and strange ultraviolet dye marks on her body, and she recently had what looked like an implant fly into her eye. Strangely enough, I've never heard of that before, and it left a blue UV fluorescent mark on the border between the white of her eye and the clear part of her eye.
Very wild. I haven't heard of that one before either. That's interesting. I remember you telling me about her. Yeah, go ahead.
She's going to go to the emergency room tomorrow and get it checked out. So we'll see if there's anything in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Wow.
Sounded like a plan to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that case before. So yeah, it's good that you're still working on it. And of course, if you have any new updates, yeah, feel free to share them.
Yeah, I'm planning on going up there this spring and trying to get some pictures. It sounds like there's an alien base inside a mountain that's about a mile from this lady's house.
That's pretty close. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah,
it sounds also like, from her description, like there's a lot of government people living there. Like they might have put a bunch of people with security clearances up there as residents, so they can count on them not talking.
It makes sense that they probably, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Seems like they're doing a lot of shifting.
She said people see UFOs all the time up there, but they don't want to talk. Nobody wants to talk about it. So she also said a lot of them are military. So
yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, they're doing a lot of I don't know, streamlining, I guess is the word. I thought they were kind of doing that a couple of years back, and I think they are still. So I think there's a lot going on underfoot in between the spaces of everybody flipping out on the timeline. Well, not everybody, just some of the other libtardian types. But so, and let's talk a little bit about Fukushima. I know we kind of touched off air a little bit about some of the things we wanted to cover tonight, but I did want to get your impression of what you think is going on. I know Fukushima, they never really gave us a real good, strong read years ago when this first happened. But now it seems like now they're all panicking that it's escalated to a very high level of radiation. What do you think about all that? What's your take on it?
Well, the recent reports I read were pretty sketchy, but it sounded like they had just found some areas inside one or two of the reactor chambers that had radiation levels much higher than they had measured before. They're probably coming close to the pockets of melted fuel, I'm thinking, but the radiation levels they measured were truly alarming, like 53,000 rads an hour. I've never heard of a radiation level like that except right after the detonation of an atomic bomb at ground zero or something along those lines.
Right. No, I agree.
You'd get enough to cause illness in about 20 seconds at that dose rate. I don't know if that in itself is anything to worry about, but the main thing that I'm worried about is the fact that they have not done anything to contain the disaster in the almost 7 years since it's happened. 6 years since it happened.
I agree. Yeah, it's been weird.
Chernobyl was far better than this. The Russians put boron on it to stop any nuclear reactions, and built a concrete dome around the damaged reactor. And the Japanese have not done that for whatever reason, and contaminated water is still leaking out into the Pacific daily.
Right.
Tons of it.
Exactly. Well, and also, I'm not sure really if there's a real blackout over there or not. I suspect there has to be but the people are still alive. I've noticed that we have had issues when it comes down to our oceans. So, and nobody's really checking. I know that they weren't checking the salmon up there in Alaska for radiation. I talked to quite a few people over there who say they're not checking for radiation.
They're not checking if they don't want to find it.
Right.
I mean, the background probably has increased a lot there. I know the leak rate from Fukushima has increased a lot in the past year or so, from what I was reading, and they're not doing anything about it. And a few months after I was monitoring this, and a few months after the accident, the background levels in California went from about 11 counts per minute to about double that, about 21, 22 counts per minute. So that means these isotopes are in the food chain over here, even though that dose rate's not much to worry about. But it's getting inside our bodies, which is something to worry about.
Right.
And I've noticed that it spikes right after rainstorms. I've seen it as high as 40 counts per minute after rainstorms.
Really?
Yeah, and a while back, I don't know if it's still like this, but a while back there was a dose rate of 350 counts per minute up around, I think it was up around Monterey Bay, some beach between Monterey Bay and San Francisco Bay. And so it's very localized, which kind of fits in with what we learned from Chernobyl. The radiation dose rates are real patchy over there. One area could be almost uncontaminated, then an area a few hundred yards away it could be highly contaminated.
Right. Yeah, that's very concerning. There's no doubt about this. Well, considering how the levels are super high right now, we'll just, I don't want to say we'll see what happens. I hate to even look into it like that, but I think it's extremely concerning, and I'm surprised that there's not more coverage on this. I mean, we are finding articles, et cetera, but yeah, there's just not hardly anybody's talking about it really in the, mainstream. You can just forget them. So.
I just don't think the Japanese are up to this. I think we ought to take over from them, and I think that for political reasons that probably won't happen. But I think in an honest world, we would need to do that. And there definitely is a cover-up going on in Japan over this. Just from studying other reactor accidents and looking at the radiation dose rate maps that the Japanese have published, they're publishing dose rates that are probably 100 times lower than they actually are. And they've actually made it against the law over there to discuss radiation from the accident. So
yeah,
I know now why they re-inhabited Hiroshima and Nagasaki right away. They just don't care about radiation over there. They just kind of bury their heads in the sand.
I'm still surprised there aren't more people who are having some form of radiation illness. There's so many different levels to it. So, but yeah, I encourage everybody to get a Geiger counter. I mean, even here in the States, and also watch the seafood. And I love seafood. It's really a shame. I mean, I used to really like seafood, but yeah.
Especially filter feeders like oysters. I would think that oysters probably are heavily contaminated. I have not measured them, but there's theoretical reason to believe that oysters and other filter feeding life forms in the Pacific would be very high in radioactive material. And,
yeah, that makes sense. Calamari too. I used to really like calamari.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be high or not. It might be.
Yeah.
Any kind of predatory sea life could be. That's near the top of the food chain could be high in radioactivity. And like the seals were getting an illness that sounded like radiation poisoning a while back.
Yeah.
Starfish were too. Maybe they're very sensitive to it.
Oh, I would think so.
That are both highly concentrating the radioactive material, and ones that are very sensitive to it will be affected first. Right.
I remember hearing that a long time ago about the starfish. I mean, this was a couple of years back. So yeah, I think there's been an awful lot of activity in the seas. The people just aren't reporting or not really putting the pieces together insofar as how that chain reaction happens. But what do you think is the worst case scenario with Fukushima right now? I mean, just by your own intuitive insight.
Humans are pretty resistant to radiation. It takes an awful lot to give you any kind of acute illness or make your hair fall out or give you any of the classic A-bomb exposure type symptoms. But what it will do in lower dosages is give you weird health problems like arthritis and raised cancer risk, and just fatigue and susceptibility to infection, stuff like that. It'll lower your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Cause miscarriages. I think it already has caused a lot more miscarriages in Southern California and the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some alarmists saying that it's going to kill everybody, and I don't think it would kill everybody, but I do think it will, if it's left unchecked in the next 10, 20 years, kill a lot of sea life and kill a lot of unborn babies and cause a lot of cancer and maybe cause radiation illness in a lot of susceptible individuals. There's a huge range of susceptibility to radiation too, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've had some problems with toxicity, but that's a different animal altogether. But yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on anyways. I thought we could address that briefly, and I appreciate your input on that for sure. And also, I wanted to kind of touch on what your take is on this craziness that's happening here. I know we have some good things happening with the new administration, but it seems like through all the good change that's happening, there's this crazy zombification of a very strange group of people. They're just like can't seem to settle down. They're just acting up every day.
Well, they're brainwashed or
Mm-hmm.
exhibiting all the symptoms of classic brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
They just regurgitate what they're told to think, and they don't think for themselves. And they're very alarmist, and they've been taken in by a lot of fear mongering. They seem terrified of Mr. Trump, and he is. To me, anyway, he does not seem to have done anything that's not in the best interest of the American people at this point. Like why some of these people are protesting to let a bunch of Muslims that might be terrorists and without vetting defies imagination. I mean, it goes against common sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
So
why there's this massive amount of protesting over this without people thinking about it, it just boggles the mind. I just can't explain this in any manner other than that it's been massive brainwashing through the media or some other source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. There's no logic behind it. There's no intellect behind it. And as we're touching base off air a little bit of it, it's just like they're not thinking. They don't even know how to answer a question coherently. They're not processing data. You ask them a question, they don't even know why they're there. Half of them don't even understand why they're even there protesting. And when they do, they don't even say what they're really protesting about. They're just like totally out of it. Really strange.
We don't like Donald Trump. Well, why don't you like Donald? Well, he's a racist, and he's this, and he's that, and they repeat a bunch of things that are unsupportable by the facts. I mean, nobody ever complained about Mr. Trump being a racist, President Trump being a racist in the 30 years he was in public life before this.
Exactly.
It's hard for me to believe that he's any kind of a racist. People say he's against black people and Hispanics and all that. He's never said anything against black people or Hispanics that I'm aware of.
No, it's all propaganda.
He simply stated a fact that a lot of criminals are coming across the border illegally, and some of them are Hispanics. That's stating a fact. That's not against any particular group.
Exactly.
They hear what they want to hear, apparently, and there's no logic to them.
No, none whatsoever.
The political left is like that. They're very dogmatic and believe what they're told to believe. It's communism, basically. This form of communism, I think, is probably even more virulent than the Soviet form was.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are saying it's Stockholm syndrome too, and I tend to believe that also. They're very happy slaves to some degree. I think they've been so socially engineered that they don't seem to understand what's going on a bigger scale. So, and these women that are protesting, I can't believe that they're in alignment with this Islamic extremism, which they really are in the Sharia law, which is completely like anti-female, anti-women empowerment. So
once again, another example of their illogic. I mean, Islam and communism are two totally diametrically opposed philosophies. Communism supports women's rights and equality, and Islamics do not support either of those. Islamics think that they're superior to every other race in the world. It is like fascism, and they're against women, and they execute gays, and they're not particularly politically correct. I just don't see why the left supports them. It doesn't
I
make any
can't.
sense
Yeah,
whatsoever.
that's what I mean. That's why I mean they have a brain virus. I'm convinced there's a brain virus. There's something not firing correctly with these people. Psychological damage. They could be damaged goods. There's so many things I'm looking at, and this is just my assessment of them. There's something very, very wrong with them. Something's really wrong with the way they're processing data, and it's very concerning. And what's even more concerning is you have people in the illusion of the Democratic parties and some of these other people that are literally feeding this beast, feeding it, and creating the more and more propaganda. You've got people in the entertainment industry pushing it. The mainstream media is horrible. So once again, the problem is that they can't settle down because they're constantly getting spoon-fed lies and deception, and they're getting kind of a boot from, insofar as getting booted up from all these people who are steering them on the passage of
Yeah.
propaganda. So
You
something's
know,
got to give.
a lot of these people believe that everything in the mainstream media is the absolute truth, and I now on a daily basis I'm seeing things in the mainstream media that I know for a fact to be blatant lies,
Hmm.
and you and I are researchers and we can see that, but these people are not and just believe what they're told by the mainstream media. So I guess it's natural that some people would be upset by it,
Hmm.
since they take that particular source of information as a wellspring of absolute truth.
Right. Well, I still think, and we've touched on this before when you've been on the show, but I do believe that there are different species here within suits. In other words, there are those of us who are upgraded, however through whether it's through spirit and consciousness or through extraterrestrial, whatever. We are definitely different than them. We have an awakening. We have a higher IQ. We are definitely beyond the spectrum of lies and deception, and we cannot be brainwashed. So I see that. I see a huge split. I really do. So.
Yeah, I've been saying for a long time. I've said on the show too that people like you and I are either a different species or at the very least a different race. We've been upgraded by aliens, or I believe it was by aliens, but by someone. And one of the characteristics of our species is that we cannot be brainwashed, at least not by these techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Even the aliens have some trouble brainwashing us.
Right. Oh, yeah. We're
We're
definitely not
control.
compatible with brainwashing. There's no doubt. And I had a question. Well, it's not really a question in chat, but if you could talk just a little bit louder, Steve, that would be great. I know you're a low talker, so
Sure.
I can hear you fine, but the chat was just asking if you can try to project a little bit more. But yeah, I know I totally agree with you that there are so many things happening here. So many factors are happening on a simultaneous scale. But the one thing I do see is that if this stuff doesn't, if it doesn't cease, if it doesn't stop, if these people don't stop their propaganda, I think we're heading for kind of a civil war. Unless we can get it under control. With President Trump in office, I'm convinced that he can put the brakes on this on some level. But you see how they're resisting him, even when he's trying to do something as simple as make sure that everything's secured when it comes down to Islamic extremism and these crazy daisies coming over or trying to fly over here to commit crimes.
Yeah.
I mean, something as simple and logical as that, they're trying to stop him on, and which makes no sense to me.
Well, I agree that we're on the verge of civil war, or more correctly, War of the Rebellion too. The correct name for the first so-called Civil War was the War of the Rebellion. That's the official name the government gave it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're on the verge of a second one. And I think that in order to get this under control, I think it can be averted, but it needs to be handled with a great care and expertise. And I think Mr. Trump might be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thing he's going to have to do is really get tough on a lot of judges and elected officials that blatantly disregard the law, like that judge that banned the travel ban did the other day.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I mean, the law is crystal clear on this. The president has almost absolute jurisdiction over who gets into this country, and saying that he doesn't is just a blatant abuse of power. And I think that he and Congress are going to have to make some arrests or do some impeachments to these people and have some accountability in place.
I agree.
The days of politicians just being able to do whatever they want in spite of what the law says need to be numbered. Otherwise, we are headed for a second rebellion.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's sabotage too. I mean, these people are deliberately putting the American people in harm's way by pushing this propaganda. I mean, they're allowing for these potential terrorists, which most of them are, be honest. I mean, they're not being vetted, and the ones that do come over do have they are definitely violent. So we do have a lot of problems here, and I agree with you. They need to be dealt with on a very intense level to a point where they have to be stopped from trying to get in the way of what we're trying to do to recover this country. And also, what really concerns me, and this is another thing I think that President Trump needs to go after, is these professors and these colleges and these teachers trying to create these propaganda stunts and inciting almost a potential crime or harm against the president. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That shouldn't even be allowed.
They're gonna have to crack down on that, and some people need to lose their jobs and or go to jail. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are sedition laws that could be enforced for this kind of thing, and it is against the law already to threaten the president, and they're going to have to start enforcing this stuff. I mean, for too long, also we've had a situation where if you're in the political right wing, you can't get away with very much before they're going to come and haul you off to jail. But the left can pretty much do whatever they want. They've even blown up stuff and everything back in the 60s and got off scot-free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand why there's a double standard like that in the American law, but there is.
There shouldn't be. And I'll tell you right now, and that's another thing too, these quote unquote, they're not protesting, they're rioting. They're very violent. They're physically abusing people. And as I said a billion times over, that needs to be addressed. These people need to be kicked out of college. If they're in school, they need to.
We should stop calling them protests. I mean,
Yeah.
the minute you start setting cars on fire and breaking windows and destroying property in any way, shape, or form, it's no longer a protest. It's a riot, and it's against the law at that point.
Right. And you're out there in California, so I have to ask you, how are things over there? Have you noticed any strange activity besides some of the protests at the colleges?
I personally haven't noticed any, but I hear there've been a lot of riots in L.A. or there were after Trump was elected. I guess it's died down. More disturbingly, word has come from Sacramento that they're going to go full force and double down on this sanctuary stuff. They're going to pay for lawyers to fight deportation for every person that Trump wants to deport, and that's going to cost the California taxpayers billions.
Wow.
And probably will ultimately fail. And I just don't see that. I think that they're abusing their authority and exceeding their authority by trying to do something like that.
It makes no sense.
They've also even. I think this is probably laughable, but at least hopefully. But they've even talked openly about seceding from the union. When right-wing people have talked about that before, like in Texas and other places, they've said that was a terrible thing to do and you can't do that. But evidently, when it suits their purpose, they can say or do whatever they want. So there's no logic to them, and they're just deceitful, crazy people, if you ask me.
I definitely think there's something very wrong with them on a psychological scale. I think they have a brain virus. I'm just going to call it a brain virus. They're not normal. There's something wrong. There's something defective. And they're putting this country in harm's way. And by going against the president, against what we decided here as a country, and not securing our country, I think that's accountability like you wouldn't believe, and treason and sedition and whatever else you want to throw in, with the whole thing. But they definitely need to be prosecuted. I don't think they should be able to get away with that at all in California. And I'm not sure, Steve. I think there are quite a few conservatives out there in California. However, I think that it's been dominated by the industry, which is pretty much libtarding, if you ask me. So I don't know offhand, but I do know people out there who are part of the community of like cameramen and people who are really skilled people, like editors and producers. They have to keep their mouths shut. Otherwise, they won't get any work.
Oh yeah, these libtards are very retaliatory. I mean, if you state an opinion that's contrary to theirs, they will do everything up to and including illegal activity to try to get back at you.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes trying to get you fired from your job if they have the power to do so.
Yeah, they're just so toxic, honestly.
There are a lot of conservatives in the state, but we're outnumbered about 2-to-1 by ultra liberals, ultra leftists, I should say.
That's really unfortunate. They don't realize that they're basically opening up a den of violence and criminal activity. It's like a cesspool. They're not bringing good people. I mean, we can vet people and we can have immigration the right way, where people come over the right way and fill out the paperwork, etc. But this kind of crap, this kind of illegal garbage, and these treasonous terrorist pieces of garbage that are trying to get over here to destroy our land and country, that's another ball of wax altogether. And the fact that they support that really concerns me, because that tells me they don't belong in this country. If they don't support our president and our flag.
The ultimate goal of the political left, at least their leadership, is to destroy this country, if you ask me. And
I agree.
And in a way, we've already started a war of the rebellion too, because we really have no rule of law in this country right now, as evidenced by the recent court decision against Trump's travel ban when he was clearly within his authority. We have a rule of expediency right now. The rule is that the government, which until recently was governed by the left, can do whatever it wants, and if they encounter a situation where they can't see rule number one, and that has to change. Politicians always talk about the rule of law. They talk a good game, but they don't come. It doesn't come down to that when the rubber hits the road. I mean, they just there's nothing's ever cut and dried, and the law is frequently clear on the books, but it's never cut and dried when it comes to the enforcement, because people try to make it fit what they want it to fit, and that's just not right. You can't run a country that way ultimately.
Right. Well, I think it's all coming to a head right now. So, I do see these guys as just becoming more and more reckless and more bizarro in their behavior. No rationale whatsoever, no logic, no education. I mean, it's really amazing to me to watch their behavior. They just seem really, really, I don't know if they're medicated or what, quite honestly, but there's something wrong.
There's something wrong with them, as you say. I think they're victims of classic brainwashing of one sort or another, probably mostly subliminal advertising and lies from the media, but whatever the case might be, they're victims of that. And I wanted to say too that right-wing political thought's not perfect, and there's some areas where there's some erroneous thought there, but by and large, it's based on logic, and the same cannot be said for the left. I mean, the left is just based on dogma and propaganda, and that's determined by their leadership, which is highly corrupt, as we now know.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting to watch it all kind of play itself out. But yeah, I think it's gonna have to end. I mean, it's just gonna have to stop in one form or another. And President Trump, I'm sure, will take the helm, but he does need to enforce everything he's trying to do and let nobody stand in his way or our way, because we need to repair this country. I mean, we watched Obama in there destroying and gutting it and committing treason. He walked away committing treason. I mean, his whole personnel walked away committing treason, and nothing happened to him, which really amazed me, because you and I had discussed this years and years ago. We were like watching the country go in the sewer, and nothing was getting done. He was sitting in there golfing, destroying this country, allowing these extremist terror cells, not only allowing them, but funding them. I mean, and that whole propaganda started, the race wars, this war, that war, and you see it all in motion. And then what happens?
I'm amazed a lot of people, especially the military, followed some of these orders, like to fund ISIS and stuff like that. I mean, Hillary and Obama created ISIS,
right?
And as you say, they funded them, and I don't see how some people follow these kind of ridiculous treasonous orders. I guess a lot of people are brainwashed, or at least overly obedient nowadays.
Right. Well, I think it's concerning, and I mean, like I said, we need to not only drain the swamp. There's a huge swamp in California. There's a swamp everywhere, but we really do have to drain everything, and we have to get rid of these crooked people that are obstructing justice, really obstructing our Constitution, obstructing what we're trying to do here as to restore our country. We have to get these people canned, fired, prosecuted, whatever it takes. There's no doubt.
Well, yeah, I mean, like for example, if a federal judge wants to interpret the law or whatever within the confines of what it says in black and white on the paper, I guess that's fine. But when they're just totally going out in left field and saying it means something that it clearly does not mean, that should be an impeachable offense, and they should actually have some accountability there.
Right. Well, when you're seeing people in the illusion of power, like even these Democrats or whoever, saying all sorts of things, inciting more violence against the president and new personnel, I say there's a problem with that. There's a huge problem with that. We've got to address it. So there's no doubt about that. And it's nice to have this conversation with you, Steve. I'd like to get your insight and your information. I know we have a question in the chat. It's we're going to go in different directions tonight. I did want to cover the political parts and some of the things that are happening here on the timeline. But it looks like we have a question from Olive, and he's asking about implants. And let's see. He says, if someone has an MRI and finds out he or she has implants, let's say in the head, what would be the best way to go about having them removed? And is there a big difference between alien implants and one put in by the military? That's a good question, Olive.
Yes, there is a big difference between the ones put in by the military and the ones put in by the aliens. As of a few years ago, anyway, I've heard rumors lately that the military has come into possession of of a batch of genuine alien implants, so that may be changing. But in general, yeah, they're the ones put in by the military are small, conventional-looking computer chips. The ones I've seen anyway, and the ones put in by the aliens are much smaller and based on carbon nanotube electronics and/or organic polymers, and they often have carbon nanotubes in them, and often contain meteoric iron, and there's a lot of differences.
Mm-hmm.
The military ones, as I say, are mainly conventional-looking silicon chips.
And also, you said that they can be removed if they're military, or obviously if they're physical enough. Is it safe to remove these things?
The alien ones, I don't know. Nobody I know has ever tried, but I remember them telling me on an experience that the ones they put in become part of the system, and the brain becomes dependent on them, and that it would be fatal or very harmful to remove them.
I tend to agree that, and that's kind of what's gone on with me in the past too, since 2004. So yeah, I can see that.
Told you the same thing.
Yeah, I can't. There's no surgery that's going to take these. It's more of an EMP blast.
It would be worth it. I mean, one thing that bothers me is that people like us don't know how we would have been. Maybe it's a fine point, but we don't know how we would have been if we hadn't been messed with like this.
I know.
And we'll never know because it's impossible to remove these things.
Right. When the damage is done too, and you get modified, that's another thing, and you know this, and I know it, and many of the listeners who have been pulled into covert programs, you just change. Your DNA gets changed to some degree, but you also kind of morph with the technology and the way that they're doing the transmissions and signals, in my opinion, anyway. And I agree with you. I reflect back before I was, hit with this program in 2004, and I guess I'm almost trying to remember myself. That's almost sad, isn't it? Because it's such a transition and it's such a change. It's like when you cross these bridges, there's no going back. There's no going back into the old worlds or into a world that was close in resonance with what we used to be.
I don't know if you'll probably find this familiar, but I think that from observing other people and myself, I think my emotions are different than those of normal people. And do you find that to be true about yourself?
Oh yeah, I would say I'm less empathic. I'm more shielded and more neutral in energy, opposed to being any. I don't have much emotion anymore. Not as much as I used to have. That's for sure. Not that I'm mean or anything, but I don't know how yours is. I don't know if you're oversensitive, but I'm actually the reverse. I'm just very neutral, I guess is the word.
Yeah, I'm like that most of the time. If I'm provoked in any way, I tend to get emotional at that point.
Well, that's passionate though. That's more energy oriented. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of emotionally flat compared to a lot of people most of the time, if that's what you mean.
Right. Yeah. Just basically, we're very grounded, but we're very expanded in consciousness. That's the way I operate, anyways. And I've always been grounded anyway. But I noticed that things were a lot more streamlined afterwards. It's just like because you go through so much different a different formula of trauma, I guess is the word, that you become kind of neutral and kind of numb to certain things. And that's what I've noticed over the years. But it's very interesting how things happen. And what's interesting, Steve, you and I can handle an awful lot, and I'm sure other contactees and people who have been pulled into programs can. But when you see these other people, they've never been, they're not contactees. These people out there protesting and these rioters, these people are just dysfunctional units. So I have to ask, look how easily they get stirred up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wow. I mean, it takes an awful lot for me to get annoyed, and when I do, I channel my energy appropriately. I usually use my words, my power, my writing, train. I have outlets, right? So why don't these people have outlets? That's another thing too.
No, I mean, we both of us were pretty upset about Obama being in office when he wasn't qualified, but we didn't go out and riot and destroy property because of it.
We have diplomacy. We actually got on the radio. We started talking about it. We started getting the truth out and communicating. We didn't sit there and yeah, exactly. We were doing the right things, the appropriate behavior. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate? And you have to ask, well, did their parents not raise them correctly? I mean, what's the problem here? Is it the school system's fault? But I really believe it is that social engineering and a lot of other things in combination.
Well, with some things, I hate to agree with some of the more black and white people on anything, but there on certain things there is a right way and a wrong way to go about it, and rioting is definitely the wrong way to go about political change.
I agree. It just creates more.
It's not even going to have any effect. All the system is going to do is rally around protecting against your violence or whatever, and that's going to have the opposite effect, if anything, most likely.
I agree. Yeah, it just creates, it polarizes anyway. It's a negative energy. And that was another thing I was thinking about with all the psychic regurgitation, all the energetic regurgitation. It's just everywhere. It's a maelstrom of filth out there. It's like a sewer, and you just have to kind of stand, get away from that energetic, but because it's very toxic, quite honestly. There's so much toxicity. I can only take so much.
Yeah.
Even being on Facebook, when you see even the news feeds that are coming in, you got to look at it and then just let it go because there's too much of the negativity and too much of the propaganda is at such a level. It's like, wow.
It'll make you crazy after a while if you're exposed to enough of that. I mean, even we're not totally immune to that kind of crap. I mean, we need to be away from it sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's good to break. I always say take a break from Facebook or anything like that when you're on the computer. You got to break off. Just do something, go for a walk, whatever, breathe, get away, listen to music, do something else because yeah, it's too much sometimes, and it never changes. The one thing that's persistent about some of these people with their agendas, it's always going to be negative. They're always going to find a reason to complain. They're always going to be griping about President Trump. They're always going to find a reason. The mainstream media is always going to pick them apart. I mean, they're predictable. Their behavior is predictable. So, but still, I'm happy he's in office, and I do think good things are on the way. And you kind of mentioned also we were kind of going through some checklists of what we wanted to talk about. And what about disclosure with, say, what's your take on, first of all, Nibiru or Planet X? What's your take on this, or what? And also any type of disclosure in general. What is your impression of what's going to happen?
On the Nibiru, I was hoping some callers might call in tonight and have some concrete information one way or the other. I've researched Nibiru and I've found no way to confirm or make or find out that it's not real at all. I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense that the sun might have a brown dwarf companion with planets, but if NASA has found Nibiru, they've actually done a pretty good job of covering their tracks. The rumor has it that they found Nibiru in 1983, and Nibiru is the name that the Sumerians gave it reportedly, and it's supposed to be on a long-term 3,600-year orbit that is way below the ecliptic, and it can be seen most readily from the southern hemisphere. But whether that's true or not, I have no idea. I've also heard that the government's preparing for some kind of disaster resulting from Nibiru coming near the Earth, but I have no doubt that there's some sort of a disaster coming, whether it be war or most likely war. I mean, this is like the 1930s all over again, right before World War II. I think we're headed for a war with the Chinese. I mean, we were headed for a war with the Russians if Hillary got in there, but now I think it's probably going to be with the Chinese and the North Koreans.
Yeah, right. And let me ask you something real quick. And I might have asked you this before. We were just talking about this last night on my show, and also I was talking to another radio host today about it. But about 2 years ago, the CIA took over all of the operations in the black sciences of Area 51 and beyond over there. It used to be Air Force, apparently. Now, do you know anything about that?
Well, the CIA has always been heavily involved in Area 51, and like they had a lot to do with the development of the U-2 spy plane, for example, and and also the SR-71. And rumor has it they had a lot to do with the Aurora spy plane as well. So they've always had a lot to do with Area 51. So
well, that's what I thought.
A small step for the CIA to take over entirely, but even if they did take over, I would think they would need heavy Air Force input.
I would think so too. That's what I was just very concerned about that, because if that is really the case where they have the final word on everything over there, I think that's concerning unless they really get some good personnel with the CIA, because from what I know about them, there's too much duality, there's too much corruption, and they've got a clean house. So
yeah, well, if it were me, I would suggest that they have the CIA just over there telling the Air Force what they need, and the Air Force actually develops it rather than the other way around.
Right. I'm hoping that's the case. But they're specialists in mind control and psychotronic covert warfare. So that's their whole thing is mind games, mind wars. So and of course the military is too. But you know what I mean. CIA they're the master control behind mind control programs. There's no doubt about that. Or initially, back in the old days.
I'm not really sure why the CIA would want total control over Area 51, because that's not their primary aircraft development's not their primary mission. But
well, I think it's more than that. I think that they're doing more with the drones over there and some other things. And also, in my opinion, I think they're doing more when it comes to artificial intelligence interface with mind control. My take, just because of where I've been with some of the technology. I think it's about mass inductions and some of the things that they can do to influence the brainwave activity or manipulate brainwaves, and that's concerning. But once again, I'd like to see a disclosure where we use this to the highest level and transcend this technology to a very high level and where it's actually opened up to everybody. But then when you see, Steve, that these people, like, for example, you see how they're acting here, you see how subhuman, it's the only word that can come in, subhumans. I mean, they literally are protesting everyone and everything with ignorance without even understanding anything, without having any educational benchmark. And so I have to say, I can understand why things are secret. I understand why we only give so much information, because when you look at some of these people out here, and we could take ourselves out of the equation and those like us, but I'll tell you point blank, it's embarrassing. It really is.
Well, what they need to do is get a lot more serious about the educational process, and people that are capable of learning should be made to do so if they want to have all the rights of a citizen. If they want, I think that there should be some test that you have to pass to be able to vote, for example. And if they can't pass a math and history test, maybe they shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's ridiculous to allow total brainwashed, blithering idiots to vote. I mean, that's not good for a country.
Well, I think half of the people that voted the last time were like encouraged, and they weren't even here. They were illegals, and dead people were voting, and ballots were stuffed in favor of Hitlery.
Well,
so
yeah, I hear that there could have been as many as I thought 3 million at first, but I heard recently it could have been more like 20 million fake votes for Hillary.
Right. Oh yeah.
And we're very lucky to have gotten Trump in under those conditions. Yep. And
divine grace, I'm telling you, it's divine law that got him in there right now.
Yeah, I can't believe this is real sometimes, but I think that Obama should have been impeached or prosecuted somehow or on election eve telling illegal aliens that it was okay to go vote. Remember that, right?
Right. Oh yeah, anything to sabotage. I mean, they were all sabotaging. I've never seen so many people sabotaging an election in my entire life, and yet through all that, through all the sabotage, through all the cheating, through all the propaganda, he still won. That tells you an awful lot.
That tells you that people are fed up with the left.
That's right.
And Obama and Hillary type politics.
And liars.
Fed up with the left the ball that has been running this country for the past 30 years, and lies and cheating and stealing and ultra corruption we've seen lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they think it's like the popular. It's like the evil is good and good is evil. It's just so weird. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's just everything's backwards.
Yeah, that's true, and yeah, people are definitely fed up with it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it was at a breaking point. Regardless of, I'm very happy that President Trump won, because it still would have been a real bad scenario, because we had enough. So we were ready to make sure that this country gets back on track the right way. So, and these people, it's amazing, because these people should have been protesting with our previous president, with Obama. The people that are out there now, that was the time to protest around the White House when he was committing treason. But these people are on the same wavelength he is. So that's what makes me very concerned.
The minute he stepped into the office, because he was born in Kenya. I don't care what anybody says or thinks or whatever. The evidence is there. His relatives say he was born in Kenya. He's got a Kenyan birth certificate. His Hawaiian birth certificate that he showed is fake. He was born in Kenya. The leftists listening to this, if any, deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Call me a birther or what? You can call me whatever you want. I go by what the evidence says, and it says he was born in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention the CIA. Basically he was basically groomed by the CIA to be put and placed in there for various programs. Yeah, his connection to Islam and everything else. I mean, we can go down a checklist of treason against this country.
Well, if he indeed ever went to Columbia University, I think he was probably like a C or D student, and that's why they wouldn't have released his records.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he was just a partier. And the bottom line is, it doesn't matter, because he had a silver spoon in his mouth to some degree by the Saudis and everybody else. I mean, he was inserted to destroy this country. There is no doubt about it. So yeah, definitely. I was really happy. Go ahead.
Yeah, he admitted at some point that he was groomed for the office, and he was a foreign student at Occidental College in California in the 1980s. I mean, how do you go from that to being a natural-born citizen to be president? And I remember them saying when he was a senator that. Wow, it's amazing that somebody born in Kenya could be a senator of the United States. I remember the Congress saying that. Then all of a sudden he's not only a Christian but also a natural-born citizen. I mean, and people bought it.
Oh yeah.
People are stupid enough to buy it.
It's that mainstream media. They keep watching crappy shows like The View and all these garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. No brain cells are firing. Simple as that. We have a question here. Let's see. B. Radley, Solaris. What are your guests' thoughts on New Berlin, aka underground base in Antarctica?
Well, it's an interesting subject. I found out that the Germans actually were the leaders in Antarctic research in the 1930s, right before World War II, and they annexed about a third of Antarctica and called it New Swabenland. They even went so far as to drop small swastikas on the ground to show anybody that was walking through there that it was German land. And they reportedly found a cavern near the South Pole that had reasonable livable temperatures and was very large enough to accommodate a large underground base. And they also reportedly sent 10,000-20,000 people there right before and during the war. And then when Germany was losing the war, they sent another 250,000 of their best people down there, and some of their high technology factories, and especially some of the anti-gravity technology they'd been working on. And so yeah, I think it's true. I think that then in 1946, Admiral Byrd sent a large force down there to kick the Germans out, and they got their butts kicked, mostly by anti-gravity driven aircraft and German UFOs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after he returned to the States, he said that the U.S. has to be very vigilant against high technology aircraft that are based in the polar regions. And he didn't elaborate on that, but he said that at a press conference once.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so yeah, I thought it was kind of fantastic when I first heard about it, but now I think it's probably true. I also heard that some people that were just down at the American South Polar Base found out there's an area of restricted airspace nearby that and a hole in the ground corresponding to that. So some eyewitnesses reportedly talked about that just fairly recently.
Mm-hmm. I still think it's a jump point. I really do. I think there's more than anti-gravity over there. I still want to get over there. I'd love to go travel over there because I just think it's off-worldish. You know what I mean? There's stuff over there that I think is beyond what people can even comprehend to some degree. I'm even more intrigued. Go ahead.
The Germans were the first to work with the aliens. They established contact with the Greys in the 1930s after there was a crash in Germany. I forget the exact location, but in 1932, about the time Hitler took over, there was a crash, and they established contact from that, and also from some of the top psychics in Germany that established telepathic contact with them.
Mm-hmm. The Vril, yeah.
Yeah, the Vril Society, yeah.
That's pretty powerful information. And yeah, I think it's really fascinating, that whole avenue of what they did and how they acquired the data. And once again, it comes back to the contactee and the state of consciousness that we're capable of establishing. Because when we do accelerate our frequency and consciousness, we are able to access multidimensional design, multiversal species. We access aspects of not only us, but also the lineage of where we come from, which is, of course, we're all off-worlders to some degree. So I've always said that, you can get there by consciousness alone. And these people mastered that through mystery school teachings and other various formulas that they acquired. So I find it very, very fascinating. That's always been one of my areas too, because of where I come from. So I certainly resonate with that, the Vril Society and the way of interpolating and bringing in streaming data naturally. And now they have the artificial intelligence array system, which, it's a very different animal. It almost runs interference to some degree.
Well, what you're saying about being able to access off-world technology through mind and meditation techniques and all that makes sense to me, because I know that most alien technology, at least most gray technology, is based on amplification of so-called paranormal abilities that the mind can access without technology under certain conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And of course, they've weaponized that in a lot of the mind war programs that they use now with the military. So everything that's ever ever been heard of when it comes to supernatural, paranormal, or extraterrestrial has been weaponized. It's really interesting how they're doing that. But we do have immunity to some degree with these types of technologies. I was going to ask you, with your personal experience and some of the research you've done with quote unquote UFOs and people seeing a UFO, including yourself, have you ever seen or heard about what about occupants in the aircraft?
Well, the only occupants I personally remember seeing are grays.
Okay.
But I've always been obsessed with reptiles too, so I wouldn't be surprised if I've seen reptilians before.
So you actually have seen things, or people actually have seen an occupant, and not just an unmanned craft, so to speak.
Oh yeah, well, some are unmanned, but the smallest manned ones are about 40 feet in diameter. So if you've seen anything smaller than that, it's probably unmanned.
Okay.
But yeah, actually, Dr. Leir and company in Turkey got some film of UFO occupants looking out the portholes. If you recall seeing the film of that large, it was kind of like a bent, disc-shaped UFO over the ocean off the coast of Turkey. They magnified some of those images and saw grays looking out the portholes.
That's very interesting. And Steve, yeah, hold that thought. Okay, now just hold that thought. We're going to have our break and we'll get back to this subject. Everybody, you're listening to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris BluerRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Steve Colbern. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.